All right, so this morning, before we dig into where we're going to the sermon, I want to get us all on the same page. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you some directions. If you're confused, just look at the people around you. Somebody got it, okay? What I want you to do this morning is I want you to take a few moments with the people you're sitting around. And you can move around if you want. I don't care. But I want you to take a few moments and chat with each other about what's the difference between new and restored. Really, you guys talk. It's cool. And as you're wrapping up that question, here's another one to put on top of it. This morning on Easter, do we celebrate new life or restored life? Spend a little time with that. New life or restored life? Everybody talked around it? Kind of have thoughts in your head? Yes? Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to share with you my answer. I think it's important that we wrestle with this question, especially today. I've been a pastor for 25 plus years, and I've heard a great many messages on Easter morning being about new beginnings and new mornings and new ways to live and new relationship with God. I've done a lot of those messages myself on Easter morning. And yet, even though I've done so many messages or heard so many messages, as I sat down to look at what God might be leading me to share this year, I got stuck on this question myself. I spent time thinking about what I just asked you to talk about. I spent time asking other people what they thought about it. This question of, are we meant to celebrate new life or restored life, is important. I believe after spending time, though, with this question, after digging into Scripture, after asking other people, after praying, I don't know if our focus should be on new as much as restored anymore. I'm not saying there's people we don't discover new direction, new ways to live life. We don't have new experiences on Easter. What I am saying is that overall, I do think we're meant to celebrate restoration over newness. I do think overall on Easter we're meant to celebrate restored life over new life. Let's look at a little scripture to see what I'm talking about. We're going to be in the Gospel of Luke this morning, chapter 24. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day would rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the disciples. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves, and then he went home amazed at what had happened. So right at the outset of this particular scripture, you have this proclamation from the two men in dazzling clothes. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? You have this proclamation that Jesus has been resurrected, that Jesus is amongst the living. This is restoration of life over death. If you remember all the way back to Genesis in the garden, there were two trees. One was the tree of knowledge. What was the other one? The tree of life. Humanity wasn't meant to deal with death, I don't believe, like we do today. We were meant to deal with life, with God. And that has been restored through Jesus' resurrection. Further down in the story, we have the women. And the two men told the women, don't you remember what Jesus said? Don't you remember how he said things were going to go down? And the scripture very pointedly tells us they did remember. They did recall those words. And then they go and tell the men, who, as we read the scripture, didn't. They had no clue. They thought it was an idle story. If we go back again to the garden, to how things first were when God made them, we have this idea, this understanding that women were created to be helpers to men, not lesser or subservient. We need to make sure we understand helper doesn't mean you're not as good or you're not equal to. On this first Easter morning, women are restored to that helper equal with men's status. In a culture, in a place where women had things stripped from them, their status put in a different place. We have this going on, where they're the first ones to proclaim to the men the risen Christ. And they're the ones to help the men out of their despair by letting them know that hope was alive. The women have restored status. They're restored to back where they were, how God made them, not where culture had pushed them. In the Gospel of John, in chapter 21, 15 through 17, we read this. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to them, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. A second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he had said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. This is a parallel to the three denials. Here on this Easter morning, what has happened is essentially Peter is despondent. Things have gone down. Jesus has gone to them. He has failed in his mission, and he went fishing. And as they were fishing, they weren't catching anything, and this guy shows up on the shore and he yells at them, throw the nets on the other side. I cannot imagine how aggravating that must have been. Right? These are trained professional fishermen. To have some dude you don't know on the shore say, hey, you're doing it wrong. Throw him on the other side. I'd have been annoyed. And yet as they do, and they pull in the fish, all of a sudden it dawns on them, and Peter is excited. It's Jesus, and he goes to Jesus. And Jesus cooks them breakfast, and they eat, and then he has this conversation with Peter, where he asked him 3 times, do you love me? To parallel the 3 times where Peter said, no, I don't know this man. I'm not a part of his disciples. I don't know who he is. Quit asking. In these 3 questions, the resurrected Jesus restores Peter to the place that he was in before, as the one that the church will be built on. I could keep sharing these stories for the rest of our time here, these stories of restoration on Easter morning. But I want to make sure we have time to talk about why it's important to know the difference between Easter being about new life and restored life. When I asked this question this morning at the sunrise service, several people shared that when something is new, you can do with what you want with it. When something is new, there's no guidelines for it. There's no direction. You make it up as you go. When something is new, the sky is the limit for what you can do. There's not necessarily any rules or any guidelines or a precedent, because it's new. It hasn't existed before. And so new life would mean that we get to determine how to do it. New life would mean that we get to set the parameters of what it looks to live as a person of God. New life means that we're in charge. But restored life, that's different. Restored means that something has already existed. Restored means that something has guidelines and rules already. Restored means there's already a form to something. There's already a way that things have happened and then what things should be like. Restored means there's already an understanding of how things work and what things do. That's why this question of whether or not Easter is about new life or restored life is so important. Because if it's new, we're in charge. We submit things to ourselves. I want you to take for a minute and contemplate what the world looks like when we're in charge. When we make all the decisions and we submit everything to our will, our want, our desire. You're not going to have to imagine too much. It's what we already do. That's rough, isn't it? Anybody excited about that world? Anybody wake up to that world every morning and it's like, I'm glad that I'm making all the choices. I'm glad I'm making all the decisions. We're doing awesome. I think we can look around and see how things are and know that's not true. But if we have restored life, God's in charge. Instead of submitting things to ourselves, we submit ourselves to God. Restored life is essentially waking up every morning and saying, God, I think I might mess it up. What would you have me do? God, what are the directions that you would have me go in life? God, what are the things that you would have me do in the world that I live in the community that I'm in, with the people that I'm around? I spent several chunks of this sermon pushing you back to Genesis, and I want to go back there one more time. You know, in Genesis chapter 1, as God is creating, there's a couple of times where Scripture says God looks at something and says, oh, that's good. But in 131, after God creates, before God takes that day of rest, God looks at everything and says it's very good. That statement of very good is essentially a statement of creation is at harmony. Everything is right in that moment. It can't be done better. This is what it should look like. All of creation is in relationship with its Creator in the way it should be. This is what has been restored on the first Easter morning. Right relationship with God, harmony with God is made possible again. Now don't hear me say that it's forced on us. We get to choose whether or not we want to be in right relationship with God. But before that first Easter, there was no choice. There was no option. It was not possible. And yet on that first Easter, everything is restored. It is very good. There's the potential and possibility for very good. We don't get to decide what that looks like, though, because God already did it. Maybe that's why we have such disharmony and strife in the world around us today. Because we, as the people of God, think we get to decide what life around us looks like, instead of living the life that God has already put into place. Today we got up this morning, we had coffee, we spent time doing whatever, and we have showed up in this place not to celebrate new life with God, but to celebrate restored life with God. But this celebration is meant to be something more than just an hour on this Sunday. It's meant to be something that we go and live. We're meant to leave this place this morning as restored people. And that means doing life as God directs instead of how we direct. That means quit looking for loopholes to get around the stuff we don't like or is uncomfortable. Anybody ever do that? Like, you know what God would have you do, but you look for the loophole to get around it because I don't want to do it that way. To live a restored life means that we step out and we don't do that. That means we might have to make change in our lives. We might have to do some different stuff, some things that are uncomfortable, some things that we don't necessarily like. Because that's what it means. We have to truly do all that we can to live as the restored people of God. And this morning, if you're not sure what that looks like, if you're not sure what it means to be a restored people of God, don't worry about it. Scripture's got you covered. And it's Scripture that you all know. Jesus makes it simple. Anybody know what it is? Okay, we'll say it then. Love God and love others. Yes, I like Beverly's like, yes, I know. Love God and love others. That's what Jesus says. It's a simple thing to live as a restored people of God. That's the order of the world that has been restored. Love God. Love others. That's what we celebrate this morning. The possibility of being able to do that. The possibility of being able to live a life in that fashion. Or instead of deciding who I'm going to love, I just know that God says love everyone. Or instead of deciding how I'm going to do and what it's going to look like, I turn to God and say, God, show me, guide me, teach me. This morning as Lauren comes up to lead us in our last song, I don't know where you are with this on this Easter morning. Again, I'm not trying to shoot down the ideas of newness, because maybe on this Easter morning you have experienced something you haven't before. That is new. Embrace it. It's fantastic. But what I'm also saying is understand that while it's new to you, it is not new to God. It is God's plan. It is God's intention for us to have life with Him. And so wherever you are with this is called the Song of Response, if you were to look at a liturgical service. And the idea is essentially that as this song is going, you get to choose how you respond as God leads you to. If God leads you to stand and sing loudly. Don't worry about singing harmoniously. Sing loud. Sing with passion. Sing as a people who know they're restored. But if God leads you today to respond in such a way that you need to sit and talk with God, or you need to get with somebody else in the room because you need somebody to talk with God with you, do that. Don't worry about if it looks weird. Don't worry about if somebody's like, why is that person sitting? Why are they getting together? It doesn't matter. Because as God leads you to respond in the ways that God leads you to respond, it's right. Don't wait. Don't decide you'll get to it later, because too often later doesn't come. And so this morning, as a restored people who celebrate the possibility of being able to do life as God has called us to, the possibility to love God and to love others, if you are led, please stand and sing. If you are led to pray, please pray. Do as God leads.